Blink and it's gone. Hesitate and you're history.
Gotta move, gotta move, gotta move.
Oh, she lost. Unbelievable.
This is Women's Speed Chess.
Oh my goodness!
It's a collision of elite minds, a global showcase of brilliance under pressure.
Wow. Beautiful checkmate there from Vaishali.
Their precision, razor sharp. The attacks, blistering. The tactics, bold. And their tempo, lightning fast.
Knight G4 and mate. Ooh, make sure you do your tactics at home, boys and girls. Knight H4, you win the queen. That's it. That's a match.
Wenjun is the champion.
The 2025 Women's Speed Chess Championship starts now.
Hello and welcome back to the Women's Speed Chess Championship, the place where the action never stops. I'm International Master Aleksandra, and I'm here with someone who probably needs no introduction, FIDE Master Mike Klein. Mike, well, we saw early on in the day that was a very exciting match, but in the end, Wenjun just showed her class to enter the quarterfinals. But next up, it is, in fact, a heavyweight showdown between Grandmaster Kateryna Lagno and Aleksandra Maltsevskaya.
Yeah, pretty exciting doubleheader. I hope everybody has saved their energy. I know that we have. We're still in the round of 16, Yovi, but you are everyone's favorite host, so it's glad to be back for another exciting opening round match.
Yeah, I'm super pumped as well because this is, for me, in my opinion, a very close match. Even though on paper, Kateryna Lagno is probably the favorite. She is, after all, a three-time World Blitz champion, also a World Rapid champion, and also a 2022 WSCC winner. But Maltsevskaya, she's an upcoming promising player. She's won the World Junior. She's also, last year, was Polish champion, although she did lose out on the tiebreak. So anything can happen. She's young, online, who knows? So let's have a look at what we have in store for today.
Okay, definitely youth versus experience. And Alana is one of two players to play in every single WSCC. So she's no stranger to anybody, but a little bit of unknown to a lot of our audience with Aleksandra Maltsevskaya. So I am really looking forward to it. And we also saw in the first match, one player definitely had an advantage in the bullet. So we just, with these sort of unknown players, we don't know as much. Let's take a look at the format because it's a little bit expedited here in the opening two rounds. So Yovi, tell us exactly how much time we're going to play each segment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have different time controls, different amounts of fun and intensity. First up, it begins with 45 minutes of 5+1 and then 30 minutes of 3+1, and then things get super intense. They go into overdrive as we end the match with bullets. So as we saw in the earlier match, it's very important that you have to keep neck and neck in the scoreline, especially in the 5+1 portion. You can't let someone just extend away with the lead. So, who do you think you have as favorite, Mike?
Well, you called me Fun Master, Mike. I do come from the junior circuit with Chess Kids, so I always hope that the younger players have a good showing. But honestly, Lano, she's made the semifinals at least the last 4 years, so it's pretty hard to call her any kind of underdog or anything. I'm certainly not saying that. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Maltsevskaya, but we're often running with the Karo Khan, so we think of youthful players as maybe playing a little more energetically, but this is the Gotham chessification of the world. Everybody's playing the Karo, so I just hope for an exciting match. And here we go with an early C5. I think Gotham even explained some of this stuff in his videos. Oh, wow. They're actually,
Yes,
you know what, Yovi? They're playing so much faster than an opening round match. We need to change our game because they're playing at twice the speed of that Zhu and Jun match.
They certainly are. I mean, basically, barely seconds have passed. And there we're seeing the Karakan. I like to think that I had a tiny bit of influence on the chess world because it is, after all, my favorite opening. But here we're seeing the players absolutely barrel through the opening moves. And there we see white basically has dark square control, whereas black is completely dominant on the light squares. But the question is this C5 break. I mean, will you even regain that pawn on C5?
Yeah, because the queen kind of wants to capture it, but notice if it moves forward, you can't exactly capture it because the queen is staying into contact with the bishop. So I would have actually thought about just playing c6 there. The closer the pawn gets to the other side, the better. And I did totally shortchange you. You literally wrote the book on the subject of the Caro-Kann. Gotham made the video, but you wrote the book. And kids, books are bigger. So just let you guys know.
I also did a course, so I have done them all. But I mean, I just love this opening. So I think the more people that are playing, the merrier it goes. But you know something? I'm not a big fan of this particular pawn break actually with c5 because I like the material and I'm just not seeing a universe where black can easily win that back. Because, you know, every time you step back with the queen to take it, there's knight takes e6. And if you like try to, you know, try to go around with a knight to try and win it, well, that's not going to find it too much success there. Also, this bishop on d3 isn't necessarily that stable as well. But there are some trumps in the black position, and that's also primarily control over the b line. So I can see that rook b8 and perhaps some doubling and some rook b2 might be there on the horizon. But, well, it might be on the horizon, but immediately white plays h2, maybe trying to get that pawn all the way over to h6.
Yeah, it's very funny. There's this cluster of pieces in the middle of the board, but a lot of them are having trouble moving. So we usually think of a move like h4 being played when the center is all locked up. The center is locked up kind of with pieces, not with pawns. And I like to think that this is the freestyleification of chess. I see h pawns just going down the board at any moment in chess games. But white is hoping to get the pawn further. Now, I like this move by black. Not only do you extricate the bishop, you stop h5 and you free up the queen to do whatever else she feels like doing. Note, of course, she's not really threatening to take the c5 pawn because if the knight takes e6, discovered attack. So we have a3. That gives control of the b3 square. What do you think about that, Yovi?
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether that was actually necessary because, yeah, I was saying that black would be planning to infiltrate with rook to b2, but there was always this whole idea that if black advanced with a3, you could block it with knight to b3. This way, there is no blocking going on whatsoever, and you do concede the b3 square for a piece. And I'm just thinking, if you manage to transfer the a pawn into a b pawn, well, that bishop on g6 is controlling the queening square. So I'm now suddenly very optimistic about black's chances.
Yeah, it's very artificial maneuver. A3, rook A2. It's like the world's slowest rook lift. The rook is trying to come up and over. And let's just have some fun. Let's give white a random move. I don't even like the move G3, but I'm going to go into analysis mode and just I want to show your idea, Yovi. I'm just going to give white a random move. I know it's probably a bad one because it weakens the light squares. But if we do play this funny exchange sack to force the A pawn into becoming a B pawn and you blockade it, well, then Black does have this move whenever he needs it, bishop c2. Probably not right away because white could give the exchange back or something. But this is a funny position where, I don't know, I don't think that the bishop is any worse than the rook. Maybe you just go after the a pawn right away and you play like rook to a8 or something, which is
Yeah.
a more clean type move. So.
Well, we might very well see something like that happen because you're completely right. You know, you don't actually need to dive in with your bishop to c2. You can go pawn hunting. The pawn on c5 is weak. And this bishop on g6, it suddenly controls a whole lot of light squares. But there you can see that the computer is indicating rook takes b2. I mean, these engines are very good. I wouldn't actually necessarily go in that direction because I'd feel like I was conceding the b line. But I guess the engine wants to back that up with moves such as knight to f5 and just grab the whole light squares because, yeah, it's just an interesting position. But so instead, okay, we're seeing that h5, aha, and this is why you needed to go rook takes rook because of rook b4. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I noticed I wasn't jumping in there to complete your sentence because I didn't have the answer, but now I see the answer. I was with you. I thought if black played rook takes rook, you'd only play that move if your other rook could come to b8 and immediately retake control of the b file. But this is the idea, and this is a very common move to miss where your rooks are lined up with each other, but you only go halfway. Somebody smarter than me once called it a co-linear move. I always hated that term. On Chess Kid, I called it the nutmeg because, like in football, aka soccer, when you kick the ball between somebody's legs, it's like unexpected. And guess what? I missed it. I missed rook b4. It's an unexpected maneuver. Okay, so anyway, the queen takes. Notice that knight takes e6 is not a crushing discovered attack, shall we say. The knight's not aiming at anything, but it's still a possible chess move in this position, and it was played.
I was gonna say it's still very much possible
Yeah, there's no
because
rook.
of this rook takes exactly rook takes rook ideas at the end of this because you can't grab on c3. So that's why I was seeing this knight drop back to d4. And now the big question is how to handle this position as black, because somehow you need some compensation. Maybe queen to c7, like target the e5 pawn.
Yeah, before it was black's queen that was overworked. And as you pointed out, well, it's now the rook that's overworked. So the knight had the freedom to come back. I'm just going to show it in arrows here. If your queen takes, then the queen's trade from the chessboard, and then the rook takes the rook at the end. So this has been a tale of discovered attack pieces. And if black ever takes, white can always remove his weak pawn by taking back with the c pawn. Of course, I realize the black queen is hanging at the moment, but those are just some positional ideas. And we are in the live position after bishop to g5.
Yeah. And it's still not an easy position for white, I would say, just because of the presence of opposite colored bishops. Because, yeah, they're a pawn up, but it's not a wonderful pawn. And this pawn on a4 can be very, very strong at the right moment, just kind of clamping down on the queen side. So, big decision now. What are you going to do with the knight? How are you going to make progress as black? And my vibe is to somehow or other you want to mobilize the knight on e7,
Yeah,
but
black did that. I
I
think
think it's a good
e6 is a
idea.
threat, actually, positional threat, because after takes, rook takes, and the black minor pieces are all kind of caught up. So knight c6 was played, and we'll catch up to the live position, which is this one. I think that was a net positive for black, though, getting rid of that knight on e7 for the really strong knight on d4. And now the computer is announcing now you play rook takes rook. Very interesting, because it looked for a while that that would just fix white's pawn structure.
Yeah. And well, I think it's a great move as well because that way, at least the pawn on a4 is a target because rook takes rook, in fact, is black's threat. You just force white to capture with a c pawn, and then you can swoop in with your queen to c3. And
Love it.
ultimately, the presence of opposite color bishops is going to benefit black. And there you see queen c3 being played, given an exclam. Nice to know that my brain cells are working even at 8:42 in the evening.
Well done. And yeah, you're spotting some stuff, Yovi. I think you should try to qualify next year. But as for this year, Maltsevskaya has equalized with this move. We don't usually think of trading queens as being a goal in and of itself when you're behind, but you do get the opposite colored bishop type endgame. And very importantly, you get by far the most active rook on the chessboard. So that's why queen c3 is kind of an exception to the rule, and you're forking these two pieces. So you're not worried about your d pawn being loose. So white, white could trade and play rook e3. That's almost like an implicit draw offer. Let's see if we play rook a1 or rook e3, or if white does something else. So rook e3, yeah, I mean, there's like a modicum of winning chances. That's actually interesting. She didn't go into the straight opposite colored bishop endgame.
One thing I was going to say is that when you have these endgames, you've always got to judge the quality of the pawns, not the quantity. And I can tell you that pawn on d5, it's passed. It's a good one. Oh, hang on a second. Maybe I spoke too soon because bishop to e4 is actually going to prevent that d pawn from advancing. And wow, the blunders are now appearing now that time has ticking down. There they see rook a2. Oh, this is nice.
Yeah, the bishop wanted to reroute itself to d4. Remember, opposite colored bishop positions, you always want to have the active bishop because, frankly, if you attack twice on a dark square, then black's bishop can't defend at all. White should have played rook check. It looks like that the king played a very natural invasion, and the white pieces are starting to cluster. But white's also burning the bridges. White could lose this game if she doesn't get a checkmate because the a pawn's going to be very, very strong. I don't even know who I'd rather be suddenly, which is not a good sign when you're trying to win with the extra pawn that white actually no longer has.
Yeah, this position is actually very, very complicated. Okay, well, there's now a passer that you need to keep an eye on. Okay, the black king can just tuck itself away in the corner. Hiding places matter. And, well, the big question is how to advance the a pawn. And that's not an easy task at all. So you go pawn hunting, but there, it's they provided us with some excitement, Mike. But in the end, this is gonna fizzle.
Yeah, bishop c1 was the safety valve. If you get rid of the a pawn, you can't possibly lose. I think bishop c1 was a very, very mature move by the veteran. Otherwise, black might have played rook a1, pawn a2, and then all the tricks about rook checks and the pawn promoting. So this one does look like it is fizzling out, and extra bishop means nothing, a well-earned draw. And I should say, pretty good clock management there. Remember, in our first match, our younger player was behind on the clock a lot, but these two players managed their time very well, and a draw in the opening game.
Absolutely. And Kateryna Lagno, I mean, we can't sing her praises enough. She's a three-time World Blitz champion. She's a winner of the WSCC. She's almost always been in the semifinals or the final of the WSCC. I mean, she's a phenomenal Blitz player. Maltsevskaya, she's unknown, but she's young. And this is the thing. She's young, dangerous, improving. And so these juniors, as we know in modern day chess, they're very dangerous despite their ratings.
Well, this is good. She plays the Caro as black, which is right in your wheelhouse. And she played the King's Indian attack versus the French as white, which I play. So at least we'll have some cogency in explaining the opening. Unfortunately, we didn't get the main lines where black plays c5 and white plays e5. And we have these crazy attacks where white tries to win on the king's side before losing on the queen's side. Things have actually sort of petered out into a little bit more normal and symmetrical pawn structure. But we'll see if it ends up being a common reoccurrence. We all know Bobby Fischer liked to play the King's Indian attack versus the French, and won a very, very famous game, one of his most famous games against Miagmarison. If you guys know what I'm talking about, great. You know a very cool classic Fischer ending. But as far as this one goes, I always like white's positions because I play them out. White's actually threatening certain discovered attacks. So knight c4 looks like it discover attacks the queen and double attacks the pawn, but Yovi's going to tell us why knight c4 is not played. Let's move it on the board there, Yovi. What happens in case of knight c4?
Yeah, I was actually trying to figure that one out because it's literally the most obvious move. So, okay, first up, you can, wow, that good. Okay, so bishop takes knight. I was just thinking queen c8, but a bishop takes knight is ooh.
And the queen is overworked. This is the third overworked piece. Well, it's only overworked if she blunders with knight c4, which she's not going to. And of course, when the queen takes, the rook on d1 is lost. And if you take the queen first, then you lose your own queen, and black's rooks magically guard each other. And in Chess Kid, we call this the Oreo because you have the two black cookies on the outside and you have the white cream in the middle. That might be my most favorite of my Chess Kid isms. Okay, let's go back to our game though. And
Okay.
instead, we had b3. Okay, now knight c4 is technically playable. Not sure if it's the best move. a4, bishop to b2. Okay, attacking e5 nonetheless. Now I could see knight c4 being played, actually. Seems like the most natural way to continue the threat against this pawn. And this knight, by the way, even if you don't win the pawn, it often comes back to e3 and then goes into d5 or to f5, which Yovi, you reminded us in the first match, is worth a pawn when you get your knife to 5.
Exactly. If when your knight is sitting there on that square, it's sitting very pretty indeed. And now decisions have to be made, because there's a lot of pressure against the e5 pawn, but there are some kind of hidden attacks against h3. So it is decision time. Do you take on e5 and just say, hey, a center pawn is better than that wing pawn? Okay, but Aleksandra just goes king to h2. And incidentally, Aleksandra is actually playing an over the board event during the day. She's playing in the Turkish league, and she did actually begin some of those games with the King's Indian attack. So she's onto a winning formula.
Wow, that's like immediate intel. We something happened earlier today, and you're already reporting on it. You are ready to be a live reporter. Wait, no, that would take my job. For those that don't know, Yovi and I worked together at the EWC, where you were the commentator and I was the live reporter. But that's cool, and I wonder if Lagno was looking at her game from earlier today. You don't usually get to scout a player's games from that same day, but who knows? It's possible.
Yeah, It's one of the perks of being a chess player, right? It's over the board chess during the day, online a super grandmaster event during the evening. It's I'm, I am just thinking about Superman, really. Reporter by day, superhero by night.
Nobody's accused me of that. Rook to e8. I'll let you be Wonder Woman. Yeah. So the rook's lining up with the queen. And now in this position, if the knight is so strong on either of these squares that black is at least paying lip service to the idea that she might take either way, and then this pawn could come forward. I'm not saying these are the best moves, but certainly if you're white, you have to at least pay attention to the fact that your queen is lined up. And sure enough, it's happening. Of course, the rook could take in this variation, which would deaden this rook. I would not be surprised to see rook takes and just putting more pressure on this pawn. But pawn takes is more critical. It forces the action. And now the knight has to go somewhere. Yovi, where's the knight going?
Yeah, this is the thing. There's a lot of moves that are possible. So first up, you have to work out the complications after e4. Now, it doesn't quite work because you can quickly do some maths and go bishop takes bishop. And eventually, at the end of the day, white is going to pick up a knight on c6 and pick up some material on f3. So that doesn't quite work. So the knight does have to move. And again, you have to look for the forward moves. Can black get away with aggressive moves such as knight to d4? Perhaps it was possible, but instead, Katerina goes, no, let's just play it safe, knight to e7. And this is one of the dangers with going passive. You do allow white to solidify, and that's a beautiful pawn chain. And now white has, I would say, a very pleasant position.
Yeah, you can see the eval bar is playing inchworm. In fact, I think it's been steadily going up zero 0.1 every zero 0.1 seconds. It's like almost like that little guy in The Price is Right that yodels. Okay, that was an obscure reference, but it's just going up really, really slowly, which tells me then, wow, I wouldn't have expected a European to get my Price is Right reference, but thank you.
I
I think that I should have gone to D4. What's that, Yovi?
no, I mean the irony is it was a very popular show in the UK. I
Good to
think there
know.
might be more people than getting that reference. I hope so.
I hope so too. I'd never like to be accused of too much Americanism, but I think the knight should have gone to d4. I mean, I think there were basically two options there, and if the computer didn't like knight d7, it should have been a little bit more aggressive, and it would have been more consistent with leaving the rook on the same line as the queen. The pawn is still weak, and black is really, really struggling for space. So far, the youngster, I think she's maybe about half the age of Lagno. I haven't done the math on that, but yeah, this one's going to be really, really interesting. And she is behind about 40 seconds, but I'm still kind of remembering our morning match where the time discrepancy was much more severe than we're seeing so far.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, definitely things are a little bit more balanced. Yeah, Alexandra Maltsevskaya, she's 23 years old. So, okay, she's not a teenager, but in my books, she's still very young and upcoming. And she's been World Junior Champion in 2018. And like I said, last year, she tied for first in the Polish Women's Championship and only losing in the tiebreak. And well, she's doing all the right things. She's got her pawns connected in a trade, and she's just inviting Kateryna to try to generate some counterplay. And already we have a decision time. First up, my greedy senses are like, just take the bishop and then just hound that pawn on
Yeah,
d4.
let's look at
Maybe
that. So
ideas such as
I like it. So what's your idea? Where are you going to put the queen?
so I was thinking of putting the queen on g4
Hmm.
because why hit 1 point when you can hit two? Hit the bishop, hit the knight on d7. Although, to be fair, you're not really doing anything on d7, but
It's funny. What you just said was exactly my thought. I was going to play this line. I'm like, look, it's a double attack. Oh, wait, we're not attacking d7. But oh, wait, it doesn't matter. We're probably just going to win d4 cleanly anyway. So I'm glad that I wasn't totally off base. I expect to see that. Um, This is not the live. Yes, she played 94, Queen E7. Okay, we're going to catch up. This is the live position. I don't know why she didn't go for it. It's also the easier move to play when you've got less time on your clock. But maybe she's just a
yeah.
very uncompromising player. We're getting to know her here in the first two games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these decisions are being made with just seconds left on the clock. I mean, we really are talking quick decisions. And so I can understand, she just thought, hey, who benefits from the opening of the E line might be black. Let's not take that risk, especially when she has such beautiful structure, active pieces. So I can understand that need to keep control in the position. But here we're seeing a situation where it is possible for Katerina to actually grab that pawn on B3.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the base pawn. And when you lose the base pawn, then the others get a little bit weaker. So this queen's going to go base jumping, if I can mix my metaphors. And now, yeah, white wins the weak pawn, but ostensibly traded a healthy pawn, the one on b3, for the weak pawn on d4. And black's pieces are starting to make a little bit more sense. And now the time becomes a big importance. We've got a 1 minute disadvantage here for the youngster. I'm looking at certain ideas with the knight wanting to jump to f6 if this knight had moved. Okay, we got Forktown, population black. Oh, queen g6.
Yeah, but it
Uh,
doesn't matter because she's just won a piece. And Alexandra's position has just completely collapsed. And in the end, it's to do with the seconds on the clock. Look at that, just 2 seconds on the clock. And now the F pawn drops. It is pandemonium when you leave yourself so little time. And yes, Katerina now is going to take control. She has that extra piece. The queen and knight are such a fabulous duo. And she wins, takes the second match, leads by 1 point.
1.5 to 1/2. And now we do have to say there's a bit of a recurrence of our first match where the time make the big difference. Apparently there was a way out of the fork, but with 2 seconds left, almost no chance to extricate yourself from that fork, especially when you don't see it coming in the first place. And now, chat, now that we've seen one game from each player and you're getting a feel for how this match will go, let me ask you your opinions on how you think the match will turn out. I wanted to wait for each player to get one go around with each color. So chat, let us know what you think is going to happen. Maybe predict the final score. Maybe you'll get it exactly right. Maybe I'll come up with a prize. No, I'm not Danny Wrench. I don't have the authority to give out diamond memberships. So, but maybe you'll get your name announced on the air.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. You can get your name announced here. That's a good enough bragging rights, right? And one thing that is impressing me, like going to the game, is how Alexandra's just switching things up. She tried the Caro, now she's trying the Sicilian, and okay, she's already forcing Katerina on only move territory, centralizing the queen. And wow, what is this? This is mess all round.
Yeah, you know what? This is like a highly theoretical line. I think I've seen it once before. Don't ask me to comment on who's better, but I've seen highly theoretical lines in games 1 and 3. Game 2 was just kind of a chess game when you play the King's Indian attack versus the French. So they're two very, very well booked up players. Um, But to my eye, the bishops are going to start to roll here. I mean, c4, the intent wasn't even just to trade off your double Islani, but when you get this bishop to b2, you have one of the happiest bishops in the history of chess. So these bishops are going to be scary, and the computer definitely prefers the bishops more than the pawn structure.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So I'm very much on your team where you're talking about the bishop being such a fantastic piece. You know what I'm terrified of? That a rook will magically find itself on g3 and suddenly the black king is in huge trouble. So yeah, I mean, I was even thinking of funny ways like a4, rook a3. Woohoo!
Mm.
Swing.
There's
Yeah.
artistry when you swing the other rook over. That's even a more unexpected rook. I love it. And don't sleep on that idea. Just because you mentioned it now and it doesn't happen right away doesn't mean it's going anywhere. I could still see it happening at some point. But okay, now this is interesting. White, Katerina Lagno, our former champion, valued getting rid of her weak pawns more than going for the direct attack, at least right away. And the bishop pair famously, I would say, loses more than half of its value once one bishop is traded. But, white will take control of the open file, and that's actually one way to get the rook up and over if the bishops had traded.
Yeah. It's a good idea. I mean, I was really afraid of like the rook centralizing on d1 and then getting rid of that defender of the f6 square. Because if you could post up the bishop on f6, it really is going to be a massive thorn on black's side. But yeah, I do think that black has to proceed very, very carefully from now on. Maybe start going, yeah, making some trades. I mean, again, you don't want to be moving that knight because bishop f6 is going to be a problem. So, and you can't really go rook to d8 because of pinning issues with rook to d1. So yeah, you're gonna have to move.
Bishop f6 might happen, but at least the knight finally enjoys a square after bishop f6, knight d5 would thwart that plan. Black wanted to play f6 to block the diagonal, but e6 was always hanging. Now, black did miss a moment to sneak the king out. So all of those ideas are gone. Black is basically saying, okay, your bishop is awesome, but my knight can at least enjoy its time in the spotlight if it gets to d5. And, computer basically says the knight is as good as the bishop. The bishop, if it does not careful, it's just aiming at a bunch of hot air for the rest of the game, whereas the knight is really happy on d5.
Yeah, I completely agree. And incidentally, the value of the knight actually increases when it's supported by a pawn. So rook to a4, and I'm expecting you gotta be careful, right? Isn't knight to d5 a nice family fork?
It is, and that's actually, yeah, we have time to take a look at that. I think the players might pause for a second. Let's take a look at this move, knight to d5, because it forks everything. It's a true octopus knight, and we're going to see if it ends up teaching us something. I was trying to do a My Octopus Teacher callback, but I don't think I was successful. Okay, so the king is going to move. And now white's actually really close to mate. The problem is after bishop check and the king moves, you want your rook to jump over the bishop for a checkmate, but you can't because your own rook is hanging. I actually don't see a winning first for white.
Well,
This is
Mike,
actually a lot
we
of
don't
position.
have to work hard because the players are going down this line. So if we refresh the get the live board, we can see this is exactly what's happened.
Yep, and now black hurries to trade off rooks because had black not played this move, then the bishop would have moved, and then rook to g8 mate would be a huge threat. So the rook slides over to the square b4, and now white better play rook b3. We're going to call that the reverse Oreo because we have the white rooks on the outside and the black rook in the middle. And it was found trying to keep a rook on the 7th rank and the king tied down to the last row.
Yep. I like that move. I like this move as well. Just saying, hey, there's a back rank checkmate if you're not careful. And of course, White says, absolutely, I spot that one. And now it's super important that you start mobilizing the rook. I'm thinking moves like rook c2, get a rook to the second row and trade a set of rooks and just get some safety for the king.
I completely agree. One of those small, subtle grandmaster things is that white's left square is a light square, and that complements the dark squared bishop. Actually, I was going to say the other thing. Um, actually, I'm not sure what my point was. I was trying to make some very
No,
highly.
no, but it's actually really important actually that you put the pawns on the dark squares, and so
Yeah.
the pawns can anchor the bishop. This is like such an important concept in games, and so the white king on g2 is virtually untouchable. I thought it was very deep the point that you were making, Mike. I was like,
Thank you. And fun fact, the word anchor got my entire third grade class spelling bee out. Because if you've never seen that H and CH, all right, I'm having that's what it was. I couldn't think of the word anchor because something that happened when I was 8 years old. Let's get back to chess. The rook on C2 aims at the pawn, and there are some lines where you might be able to force this rook to take, and then play knight check, or even just play knight check right away because the rook can't take back. Now, I'm not saying that knight check wins the game, but it's at least something that white has to think about. Clocks are about equal in this one, Yogi.
yeah, absolutely. And talking about words, the words that stumped a whole class was a vacuum. I mean,
Mm,
where do you see a double U?
that is true. Vacuum, not something you want in your spelling test, and not something my cat ever wants to see. I don't know why cats are afraid of vacuums. So pawn a3. Okay, the rook's finally traded. Now you have knight e3, and I think the only point of playing it actually is to reroute the knight to c4 to target the pawn. But it's kind of hard to get rid of that awesome octopus knight. So instead we had pawn to f5, getting the pawns moving. Maybe f4 is coming, although the white rook is starting to gain some activity.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about this position is with the knights is that you really need your knights supporting, and you do need them to have a purpose, basically a target to attack. And I'm not entirely convinced by putting the knight onto d1 because the a pawn is so weak. I would have been a lot more comfortable if black had chased down the a pawn, but instead, well. Black is arguing that the White King is in some danger.
Yeah, this is the hero move. When the knight was here, it could have just gone back to c4, as you mentioned. Aim at the a pawn, guard your own a pawn, but instead, she's giving away the entire queen side. This pawn could be super fast, and she's going for an attack on f2 and an attack on the king. Turns out it's a pretty solid idea. I'm just not that brave, or as you taught me in our first match, plucky. I'm not that plucky. I would have just guarded my a pawn because I look at the fact that I might lose my a pawn. I think I could lose this game if my opponent has a passed a pawn coming down the board.
Yeah, and I would also be very worried because rook and bishop they combine very very well, and not only that, is that as a long range like attacker defender, the bishop is able to keep an eye on past pawns, whereas the knight has to go on a little bit of a journey. But I'm expecting that we see some trades, and there we see knight takes f2. Now here it depends on the mood of white. I mean, do you want to capture on f5 first? But rook takes pawn, and yeah, this is the move. I think it's absolutely forced, and it's indicated by the engine. You have to get some counterplay. Try and trade off the knight for the bishop. All rook and pawn endgames are drawn. No, I lie. But then they're quite heavily drawn.
Yeah, they certainly are. So nice always when you can find one of those blue moves that Maltsevskaya found, uh, indicating that it is the best line by far by the computer. Okay, the F pawn does fall. Notice that she does have a time advantage in this game as opposed to game two, where she really suffered from her lack of time. So kudos to her for speeding up. Now you can play the rook and pawn endgame. Rook takes bishop, king takes knight, and then probably all rook endgames are drawn after rook a4. But she again goes for the hero line. Not sure I agree with this, but she could still probably get the a pawn. But the knight is a little suspicious over there on h2. So she doesn't like simplification. I think I'm learning that about her.
Yeah, I think she was just afraid, right? Because if you did go for that rook and pawn ending, there is a danger that white might win the h pawn, and white would be left with two passed pawns there on the king side. And
She walks it over.
oh,
Yeah. So the,
oh,
the knight was loose for reasons that could not have been predicted. But you're right. She had fears about the rook and pawn endgame, but this one didn't turn out much better. So that's two straight wins for Lagno. Just making sure I have the total score right. Yeah, 2.5 to 0.5. And we're into a bishop's opening. Okay, but really unfortunate there. Maltsevskaya, I don't haven't been looking at her expression that much, but obviously not terribly pleased about not being able to hold that endgame.
yeah. I mean, I find that, well, I think that the culprit is really the journey that she went on with the knight. I think it was very important that she activated the rook. After all, in games, you do activate the piece of higher value because knights are very happy when they're supported by their pawns. But okay, different game. She's going to have to reset. We've seen comebacks before in the WSCC. And now we're going to have a bit of a long maneuvering game where we're going to see some battles occur for the d5 square and all kinds of issues with the pieces.
Yeah, similar to our opening match, we had a lot of double king pawn Italian type setups, but this bishop was always dropping back to e7. And because h6 was played, there's really no reason to go back to e7 since there is no pin on this knight. So a little bit more of an active way of dealing with an Italian setup. I'm still a little bit confused by why white went for the bishop's opening setup with bishop c4 and move 2, but maybe in a future game it'll be revealed. And now, Yovi, this is that attack in a box we talked about this morning. When the f pawn becomes an e pawn, the queen is basically invited to the express lane. This knight goes to h4 and f5, and everything is just ready for the attack. I always love these positions for white because I know what my next four moves are going to be.
Yeah, it's looking very, very nice. And it's the kind of position that you do want, especially after a long day of chess, rather, because let's not forget that she is playing some over the board chess earlier on in the day. In the evening, it's online blitz time. And what you really want to do in that kind of situation, what I would imagine, anyhow, maybe Mike, you have a different opinion, is kind of just keep the game very fluid, very simple, nothing deep, nothing that will actually test the brain power early on in the game.
Yeah, apparently she played two games in Turkey. So she's away from home. She played two over-the-board classical games. I thought only we only were that sadistic in America. I didn't realize Europeans ever played two games in a day. I guess in league matches, you kind of have to since everyone's traveling. So two league matches in a day, and then she's got to play approximately 15 games against a former vice women's world champion, former women's speed chess champion. That's about as tall as an order as I can predict. But she wanted to be a good teammate. I can understand that. I think we're going to see some tiredness as this goes on. And we saw it right there by her hanging a knight, and she had plenty of time to see that and just missed it in the round two
Yeah.
game, round three.
Yes. But would you say that it's a trademark of the younger generation to continuously play chess? Because I remember growing up, I was reading the books of Botvinnik, and Botvinnik was like, don't play blitz. Don't even play more than 55 games per year. And now everyone is playing all the time.
I've never heard the number 55. I don't think I play 55 online games in a year. I'm too busy recording videos. But yeah, I think that the younger generation doesn't observe those sorts of rules anymore. Remember, back then, you probably had to take, a 3-day train ride to get from, St. Petersburg to, I don't know, London. And it was probably more exhausting back then.
Yeah, and talking about train rides, well, Black's evaluation bar is just inching up, and it's because of this tactic. Knight takes e4, giving a double exclam, but the rook is just loose. Oh, it's not going well for Alexandra here.
Yeah, obviously missed. She could have taken with the pawn and avoided this. Obviously, if she had seen knight takes e4, then she would not have gone for it. So a double exclam move, and it was found. And now all of white's pawns are about to be fractured. We're going to see knight takes knight on the next move, and then we might see rook d2. We did see it, and this is what we call groveling. Now white does get some activity. I was wondering if black should have prevented that instead of playing rook d2. So white might still hold the draw, but this is not the fun way to play chess. Black's about to double rooks, chase the white king all over the board on the second rank. And yeah, this is not an enjoyable position for white at all.
No, I mean, how do you even deal with that threat? I think you literally have to go with your king to h2 or go rook g1, or you drop back with a rook to c4 and then kind of try to cover g2 with a rook on g4. But either way, one rook is going to be super passive, whereas black will have two, what do you call them? Two rooks on the second. Like the old word was pigs. Like like you have the what do you call the swine, the blind swine mate, which is which is like the most ridiculous name for a checkmate ever.
Yeah,
Um, but
pigs
anyway,
on the seventh is still used. I sometimes go with Pac-Man when there's more pawns because it's like eating power pellets. You're eating all the pawns. But pick your metaphor. The rooks are clearly working incredibly well together. Now she did choose h1 and the rook coming to g1. I wouldn't say that's worth an exclam move. I mean, what else are you supposed to do when you play king h1? But in any case, it is the best move. And now if you're white, I think you're trying to get rid of all the queen side pawns, and then you can just huddle up on the king side and hope for the best. So that's what I would try. I'd play rook takes b7, take the a pawn, and this is actually looking more defensible than 3 moves ago for white.
absolutely. But there are some points to it. So, for instance, if black ever lines up the rooks on the second rank and advances the f pawn, you have to keep an eye on a potential f3, right? Because that will just completely crash open the king side because of a potential checkmate on h2. So, here it comes. So, white has to be very careful here. Now, if you see f4, you got to go rook f7.
Yeah, in fact, I would show it, but I'm actually expecting f4 anyway. So I would be surprised if we don't see f4. Although maybe after f4, white would just play rook f7 and try to trade the a pawn for the f pawn. And I guess black realizes that, so the rook goes back, trying to win the pawn cleanly. And we might have rook in 3 versus rook in 2, where Lagno will press and press. Should be a draw, but you do have to be on your guard as white.
Yeah. Well, I was expecting the Black King to step forward, some kind of king to f6 and then try to inch forward that way and try to get in a very smart f4. But, well, as we're seeing, Kateryna, she's just saying, I'm going to go for the a6 pawn, now king to g6. And Well, interesting. Interesting that Alexandra didn't want to exchange off a set of rooks, because I feel that this is inherently a lot more dangerous to defend for white when there are all the rooks on the board.
I'm also confused because if you set this chess player up to somebody of Alexander's level and you say, hey, I'll let you take one rook off the board for each color, she would say yes, because we all know that rook and 3 versus rook and 2 should not be that difficult to hold. I don't know what the evaluation is here, but the presence of an extra rook, I don't know, gives black a little bit more life because the rooks can team up. Maybe at the right moment, these two rooks reconnect on the second rank. You lose this pawn, but you grab that one, and then the white king's in trouble. The thing is, two rooks can mate a king, one rook can't. So you add this element of a king attack that does not exist at all. And right on cue, she trades rooks and gets rid of everything we just said.
Yeah, then presumably she was worried about rook to g3, so she wanted to kind of rule out any problems like that. And okay, I can understand the reasoning. She has
Can you
a lot
take?
of time though on the clock. I would.
I think you can because the rook check is answered by rook
Oh,
f1. What a funny position. It looks like it's either a Kubel puzzle or it's just a draw. And in fact, it's just a draw. There was no fancy tactic. I guess that was missed by Lagno. And now I would expect this, of course, to become a draw very, very soon.
yes. And well, you said it would happen, and it did. So we move on to what is probably going to be the last game at this time control, because only just under 3 minutes left on the match clock. And we're seeing another Caracan. I'm very happy, Mike.
Yeah, in fact, I'll just go to mute for the next 90 seconds while you take over the theory. Yeah, but we didn't see c5 like we did in the opening game. Do you like this a5 move better?
Yeah, this is interesting line. So the whole idea is that you can do these kind of queen to b6s, but you're just basically just working against white's eventual plan of going a4, a5. And so here you just got to focus on development. The main thing in these kind of positions is black doesn't have too much space. So if you manage to get a role for each of your minor pieces, so for instance, you might see the knight go to e7 or to h6, and the bishop will tuck itself away on either g6 or h7, but a knight will appear on. Oh, okay. Just as I was kind of going for the middle game,
Hmm.
Alexandra immediately breaks out with f6. Now, I'm not sure about this one. I tend to be very reluctant to break out with f6.
Yeah, and this is just straight up normal chess in the sense that when your opponent moves the f pawn, you should immediately think about putting something on this diagonal. And we'll just go back for a second because you saw the blue arrow. The computer just says, just play knight to h4, get rid of the dark squared bishop, or at least make it move again. And then, I mean, the follow up has got to be bishop to h5. And I don't think black is going to be terribly happy about this pawn being on f6. Just got a text from Ben Feingold, never play f6. Thank you, Ben. And this is why Ben is currently clipping this and making a YouTube video out of it because it is a classic never play f6. Well, let's move on to the live game. It was missed after castles. More weakening of the light squares. Unbelievable. I don't understand how to play chess at all. And we'll advance to the live position. I think black or white missed another blue move. And okay, Yovi, we've caught up. What do you see here?
Yeah, I was going to say black is playing very gutsy chess. You know, it's taking a lot of risks. And white isn't necessarily punishing them straight out because, black now has some really good squares, knight to e4, bishop to e4. So you have to challenge. So I'm expecting something to appear on e4. Ooh, ooh, ooh,
Ooh,
ooh. Hang on a second.
castles.
Isn't there some kind of bishop takes pawns and rook c1
Uh-huh.
idea?
Yep, very well spotted. You were faster than my finger in that position because when the king and queen are on the same line, you don't have to ask an I am twice. And oh, bishop to d2. Apparently, that's just as good because I think this pawn is a better pawn to win. Rook c1, still an idea. If you take the g pawn, you could end up inviting an attack on your own king. So, a very professional move, bishop to d2. I'm impressed by this move rather than taking. I already love it a lot more. When you win this pawn, you free your own pawn. The king steps to the side because rook c1 was the bigger threat. And now I think you just take. Although I guess you could play
Rook c1?
another professional move. Yeah, play it first.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's really doing the job because where can you go with the queen? And now you can take on a5, and uh-oh, the rook is falling. It's fallen off the board, and it's just game over for black.
Yeah, really nice in between move. If we had taken on a5 first, Yovi, you probably saw b6 would block the skewer, but by playing rook c1 first, it becomes more than a pawn. It's an exchange and a pawn and an attack, and more time on the clock. Everything going White's way. This is officially the final game of the 5+1, and it does not look like Maltsevskaya is going to get a win in the opening segment unless something amazing happens here.
No, and she'll be trailing. If she loses this one, as it seems very likely, she is going to be trailing 1.24. And she will have to do some serious rethinking in the 3+1 portion. I find that Aleksandra perhaps has taken too much risk. It's like somehow she's been a bit cautious in some games, and then in the other, gone completely the other way. She just has to balance that out because she's very quick. But b4 coming, and yeah, now it's just a question of trying to go into survival mode.
Yeah, not speaking to this game because she may have just wanted a really double-edged game, but that one knight versus bishop endgame with the rooks on the board, you have to have some universality to your game, and she just kind of refused to play the slightly worse rook and pawn endgame. I think that uh, potentially drawn position that she was not able to hold was really indicative of what you just said there, Yovi. Just a little bit too much pluckiness. Need to be a little bit more pragmatic sometimes. But okay, there's no harm in playing this one out. The match clock is essentially paused because it's our final game. So you're not hurting your match chances by playing this out and just seeing what happens.
Exactly. And well, we'll see how clinical Kateryna is in this type of position. We'll see how she handles this. I mean, there's many, many good moves. I mean, she could simply slide over with the rook, try to advance the queenside pawns. I'm always a big fan of just going rook b1, a5. Okay, but Aleksandra to play, so she starts advancing forwards. But yeah, ultimately, this is a lost position. How are you going to defend f5? Not
You
possible,
know,
right?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not because of rook over. Of course, that becomes a giant family fork or royal fork, depending on which term you like. So that's not possible. The queen decides to take. There's a certain freedom in being totally lost. You can just take a b pawn that you would never normally take because of the intuitive fear of rook b1. But why not try it? You're attacking this knight a million times, and you had to do something if the f4 f5 pawn was not defendable. Ooh, wait a minute! Our second king and queen lining up situation. If pawn takes rook to b1, that is a double exclam move, and that is a flashy way to finish this game. Knight to a6, a fork followed by a pin. That is Puzzle Rush 101, or actually 202. That's an advanced tactic.
Yeah, that is a beautiful one. Knight to a6, rook to b1. I mean, it just goes to show you got to always look after your king, and the way that she castled queenside, just not foreseeing the consequences. Yeah, Aleksandra loses, Kateryna wins, and well, she leads by 4 points to 1. And there we can see the reactions from the players. Aleksandra is just simply going to have to reset, refocus during the pause, and Kateryna Lagno, she's in full control. It's more or less just do the same. Don't change what is working for you.
Yeah, 4-1. I think that was the same margin that we saw in the opening round match. It was a quick drink of coffee or tea, whatever is in Lagno's mug. Well deserved, and they're going to go to the break, and we can't let it get away if we are Maltsevskaya fans. You got to keep it a little bit closer to that so that the bullet it becomes interesting.
Yep. And well, we are going to go on a short break, but when we return, well, time is going to get slashed as we moved on to the 3 minutes plus 1 second portion. It's where speed meets strategy. So stay tuned.
It was black move and we was in the strong take note. Firstly, he told me that he planning to play rook d1, and I also, because we have position like something like here, and I don't want to play queen d8 because of rook d1, then I noticed that I can play knight f6, And here, okay, it's equal position. If he will play queen b8, we can take and take on h6. It's a draw. But he tried to do something more and he played h5. And after knight e7, it's a bad position for black because I want to play queen g8. He played queen b8 and I played queen d5. Here I realized that I have big advantage because I want to take on f7, take on e4, also at some moment maybe knight c6. And also we have seconds. He can't play something like queen d6 because I can take and take on rook on b1. I think he played rook b6. After queen e4, it's maybe just a little bit better position, but of course I take here. Okay, he played h4. If I'm not mistaken, something like here, I can play rook e5 and I think it's over for black because after h take g3, I can play queen h5, just take on e5 and the game is over. And he can move his bishop because of rook h5 and mate in 2, but I didn't saw it unfortunately. I give a check, rook h6, check, g6, check, take on a6. I think my king was on h2 actually, because I think he take and I play king g2. Yeah, and he take here and... Okay, you know what is funny? I can't explain knight a5 move. Firstly, I thought, of course, I can take on g6, but I calculate something like f1, take, check, king g2, and in my mind, his queen also is on e2. I don't know how. I even can play king f2, king c2, and it's draw. But in my mind, king was on e2, and I thought like king g1, queen e3, king g2, queen h3, and I'm losing. And I was shocked, and then maybe I panic and play knight a5, f5. But you know what's the most interesting fact? That we are finished the game immediately after knight a5 because of f1 and queen b5. But after the game, I told him that I can play just rook f6. He said, yeah, it's probably good to move, but black don't have any normal move because they can't move queen from 8 rank because of queen g1 mate. And okay, it's around +2. It's not easy to win, but it's winning position.
And we are back with all the action of the women's speed chess. Kateryna Lagno and Aleksandra Maltsevskaya, they clash in the 5-minute +1 portion. So let's check out the scoreboard and see how it's been faring so far. Because as we can see, Mike, once we check out the scoreboard, that absolutely everything is going in Kateryna Lagno's favor. Things haven't been working out for Aleksandra Maltsevskaya at all.
Yeah, 3 wins, 2 draws for the veteran. There's a reason that she is a 4-time semifinalist, and there's also a reason that she's a past winner. The only past winners of this event are legends, Wenjun and Hou Yifan. Kateryna Lagno in great company, and right now she is showing us that if history is any indicator, she's going to be a force in this event. Maltsevskaya needs to get a W soon.
Yep, she definitely does have to win a game. There we're seeing perhaps some tiredness on the face of Alexandra. We do know that she's been playing not one, but 2 games of over-the-board chess during the day. So perhaps this is perhaps a little bit too much chess. But either way, she has to reset, refocus, re-energize. Katerina has been in boss mode so far. But we're in the 3+1. What do you think we can expect, Mike?
Well, she's remember in our opening match, we had one player get very far behind on time in the 5 minute, but speed up in the 3+1. Maltsevskaya has already been nearly as fast as Lano. She's just failed at a couple of critical moments. But I think what you said going into the break is the key thing. Can she take what the position gives her and not go for too much? You know, you can be an uncompromising player, but even Mikhail Tal occasionally took some draws. And so just a little bit more restraint at certain moments. And here we go. Already she plays C4, which is a little bit of a slower opening. But okay, here we go with a ready. We're off and running in the 3+1. We're going to play 30 minutes in this segment.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting approach here from Alexandra. We've seen her just keep on switching up her openings at every single game. Right now, it's a Sicilian or Reti, as you described it, and it's a completely different type of game. And so Katerina is definitely gonna have to bring her A game if she wants to be handling this change of pace.
Yeah, notice their chess.com blitz ratings are actually not that far different, despite the fact that one player, just has a lot more classical chess experience. So Katerina also is I believe, 2-time World Blitz, 3-time, I shortchanged her, 3-time World Blitz champion. So just a lot of years of experience here. And we can probably not start talking about match control just yet, but even if Lano plays a couple of draws that are long games, that's going to help her a lot in the bullet segment. Okay, so bishop f6, putting a lot of pressure. And if you're white, do you keep the tension? I think you kind of have to for the moment because you've got a loose knight down here. So essentially, black is making a pin, and black already has PP on the PP. That's pressure, putting pressure on the pinned piece. Wanted to make sure that you guys understood what that means.
Very nice. I don't think I've ever heard that expression before, but I like it. Pins everywhere. And there, I agree. White just has to reinforce the center. There you're seeing E3, and I'm expecting, oh, yeah, knight to E2. White really has to go on the defensive here. And the problem now is black's super active with their pieces. And there's no easy way for white to do like the kickback. You really want to be going h3, boot that bishop away from that pin. And then at some point or other, you want to protect the bishop on b2 so that there's none of the other pin. I mean, what was that again? PP on the PP? So
Yeah, it's when
relevant.
you and it happened again. There was a pin on the knight, and black immediately does PP on the PP. That's putting pressure on the pinned piece, and it'd be a big mistake for the bishop to take, because then when the queen took, then there would be, I'm not going to extend the metaphor, I'm just going to say there would be another case of PP on the PP. This knight would be totally lost in this position. So you laugh, but everybody remembers when I say it, and that's the most important thing, is that you remember our lessons from today. So let's go back to the game. And we are in this position, knight to g5. We had h4 trying to extricate herself from this pin.
Yeah. And well, now black is simply saying, hey, you can't do that so easily. You're going to have to capture in the center with the pawn. And okay, well, black will have to move the knight. So the effect of the pin will be lessened. So I'm expecting black to go knight to e4, centralize, and then just sit pretty with the bishop on g4.
Yeah, and the drawback of h4 is you can never go back to play h3 and put up the no parking sign on the bishop. So, not the most important square on the board, but black does get to control g4 for the foreseeable future. Okay, this is actually a very restrained way of playing and just trading off everything. But we did say that sometimes you have to take what the position gives you. And it looks like Lagno is just trying to sit on her match lead by just going into a totally equal position. Maybe even the white queen, since it has a little bit more pressure, can be said to be favored. Computer actually says there's more here to meets the eye. Computer is saying it's almost +1 with control of the open files. So liquidating did not exactly get a definite draw. Black is going to have to work for this one.
No, I agree with that, the assessment of the computer. Basically, I always judge this type of position by piece activity, king safety. And take a look at Black's king is not that safe because, it's vulnerable to a back rank mate. Take a look at the activity, the rook on A8 versus the rook on C1. That actually has a line to infiltrate. And White's queen actually was targeting the D5 pawn. So I'm a bit surprised by the queen to c3 maneuver. I was expecting moves like rook c5 and then lining up. But this one also, oh, it's looking very nice and a mistake.
Yeah, and I think both Yovi and I were looking for an immediate. Was something hung? Was there a fork? Was there a back rank mate? It turns out the black queen is just putting herself off sides. She's just on the wrong side of the board, and with limited artillery, I guess it's kind of hard to say limited when they're two heavy pieces. But these two pieces are becoming a force against the black king. This pawn is weak. The seventh rank is weak. Careful if you ever push this pawn because you'll just make the seventh rank even weaker. A lot more here than meets the eye. I wonder if white can even start throwing some pawns down the board, like a g4 type advance. Maybe it's not needed though. Maybe you can inch your way into the position.
Yeah, I'm thinking that as well. You can step up with the queen to f6. By the way, a queen on f6 is a dream square for that queen. And I'm also liking your idea of just exploding open the king side. Just open up lines, more avenues for the black king to have to deal with. So I like. I mean, after queen f6, actually, how are you going to do? Okay, queen to e7. Okay, I
Yeah, I
like
like
it because it has no risk.
It's true. I like the tag team approach. I liked your idea, Queen f6, threatening f7, and then playing g4 because the black king would be totally stymied on the back row. But this is still very, very favorable. White is playing for two results in this position. But at this point in the match, she needs the one result. She needs to win, and she's going to have two connected pawns. This should almost certainly be winning. I expect rook a4 to happen, although you could probably drop the d pawn and still win. That's probably what she's considering right now. Do you just start throwing the pawns down the board, or do you have your rook become a little bit passive with rook a4, but hold on to all your puppies?
Yeah, I'm voting for the start. So motoring with the pawns b4. Let the white king deal with the protection over the d5. Now you just go a4, and then what you have to do is I is a technique that I call the caterpillar. You
Yeah.
go rook a6, b6, a5, ever so slowly, but you get there. And yeah, there you see Alexandra doing exactly what I was talking about. The white king is gonna guard and protect against the d4 pawn, and the white rook can handle and help advance the queenside pawns.
Funny idea with rook to d4, because if your king had landed on that square, the pawn would have come down, your king would have gotten in the way. But once that trap was eschewed by Maltsevskaya, the towel was thrown in and she gets her win. That is a very important win to open the 3+1 segment. And now it is 4-2. She got her first win a lot earlier than in our opening round match. Okay, so we're in a Sicilian, and Lagno's first turn with the white pieces in 3+1.
Yep. And very important win there for Alexandra. And we're going to see, is this the beginning of a comeback? We have seen a comeback before in WSCC history. I remember Alice Lee against Vaishali. She was down several points. She made her comeback in the 3+1 portion. So anything can happen. What she has to do now is just to hold the nerve. And there you're seeing that she just plays these uncompromising openings. Now it's a Sicilian.
Yep, and to go back even further historically, we already mentioned this once today, but Valentina Gunina once came back from 4 games down. Luckily for our Polish friend here, the margin did not get to be that high, but don't forget, she's played 2 classical games today. I don't know what time it is in Turkey, but I'm quite sure the sun is not still up. So we're going to see if she has the energy level to continue this comeback. Queen to h3. Okay, I'm already. You know what I want to do? I want to pretend this pawn is not there, and I want to play queen takes e6 and go for a checkmate on g6. It's a dream, but not quite going to work. It would work if the bishop got here. So can I have some fun, Yobi? Can I have control for a second? I'm gonna have some fun here. Let's have this rook take the pawn just for total funsies.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to play rook takes b2. So we're going to play bishop to g7. The rook is going to move. And now, oh, it's not going to work. I have to somehow take this pawn. Okay, I can do that. And then I have to
You can do
pretend that
that.
yeah, then we have to pretend that this rook is not hanging. And then I want to play as queen takes, pawn takes, bishop takes g6. And a very, very fancy checkmate would be on the board. But that's just a pipe dream. We should go back to reality.
Yeah. And actually, that particular bishop mate has a very fancy name. It's called the, get this, Mike, the double bishop mate.
Okay. I would have gone with, I don't know, the double laser beam, but I live in the world of 6-year-old lexicon and what appeals to kids on Chess Kid. All right, but Queen H3, big think here for black. So we did have time to show fancy mates. We didn't know that Maltsevskaya was going to take so long. I do have a rule when I co-commentate with Grandmaster Malik Kashian, we always have to show fancy checkmates, no matter how unlikely. And then he always says Matanovich afterward, after Grandmaster Matanovich, and I guess he was a very creative player. But
Yeah.
all right, rook to b4, not taking the poison pawn.
Well, very nice creative move, right? Designed to meet any bishop to g7s with rook to h4. And now we're seeing rook to g8 from Aleksandra. She was worried about your bishop to g7 plan. And I must admit, I was as well. I thought it was very dangerous. But is one of those positions where black has great center, but that's a long-term thing. And if white can just generate some play, so I'm thinking here, get greedy, bishop.
Whoa.
What?
We have an exciting blue arrow on the board. This is a blue arrow special. If only Kmart were still in business, they might sponsor us. Rook to h4. So that is a exchange sack. Pawn takes bishop, takes bishop. And then you can play bishop d2 later because you have control of the... Okay, let's put it on the board. We don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to show it. So here, and then takes, and then bishop takes bishop. That's a deep exchange sack. I'll put it that way.
It's beautiful, though. I mean, you're just arguing that with that, white's attack just is completely neutralized, and black can simply go on with consolidating the position. I mean, black has control of all the dark squares. You don't need to rush with g5 or anything like that, but it's definitely an idea. But rook to h4, I mean, it is a little bit like cyborg chess. I mean, I'm not sure many of us would have had that move on our radar, but this was a lot more likely. And now white can grab that pawn on h7, and sure enough. And the big question is white going to get caught with the hands in the cookie jar, you know, with the queen out there on h7?
Yeah, not much a chance of her getting trapped yet, but give it time. If the black rooks ever connect in any way, she could get herself trapped. I think you look for a move like rook h4 if you see a position like this and realize it's like totally hopeless or desperate. So she may have just said, you know, I can still play chess after rook b8. I'm not totally lost after losing the h pawn. So, I mean, I would have never have found the move. That's actually, we always say, like, if you give a strong player a signal and you tell them that there's a strong move, they'll find it. I'm not even sure I would find that move, even if you told me there was a strong one. That's how weird it was.
Yeah, and talking about strong, well, our viewers think that it is Kateryna Lagno who is the stronger player of the two, who has the better chances. 87% predicting that she is going to win. And well, one thing you got to do is you got to cheer for your favorite players, you know, because you never know the impact of that positive energy. And now we're seeing a massive turnaround, some changes happening because well, what happened to the exchange? And now a knight is coming into d6. It's a beast.
Yeah, but you can't play positions like this with 1.8 seconds on your clock. That would be true cyborg chess. So the exchange sack was not bad. The pawns were mobile, but I mean, I cannot imagine surviving such a position. Now, the king does have to find a place to hide. It's not like the light square diagonal is available to it with this bishop coming to b7. But once that problem is solved, maybe even just the knight going back, it chooses the rook instead. But if you actually complicate the position at all, just black can't survive on the clock. So just keep the
Yeah.
position complicated, play rook d1. I say that, but I'm not 23. I don't remember how fast the kids are. Maybe
And
she's going to survive.
she might survive, but she was on 1 second, as you pointed out. She's now built up that time to a staggering 4 seconds. So that's like something positive. I mean, also in terms of the positions, suddenly things are not that easy. But Kateryna now ticking to under the minute. But I'm still expecting Kateryna to nail this one because the position is just so incredibly complicated. And now it seems to me there's some tricks. Queen takes pawn, knight c8.
Wow, the rook is overworked, guarding the fork, as you pointed out, Yovi, and guarding f7. Will it be found by Lagno? She already found one queen sack today, but does not find this one. She decides to open up the black king. But yeah, wow. Okay, I'm about to eat my words because black could actually hold this position. Now white has gone crazy and almost flagged 0.3 seconds, and she plays queen b2, going for mate on g2. Whose king is going to get mated first? Somebody's going down. I don't know who.
Yeah, someone is going to go down. The evaluation bar is going crazy. Queen to g2 is a massive threat, so you have to cover the g2 square. And no seconds. And it's that scary d pawn.
Yeah, she has 1 second left, which means she must have played that with less than 0.1 seconds for our clock to show 1.0. Almost a
And
mate,
okay,
and
now
now
we're
we have
seeing
an
some
endgame.
traits.
How could there be an endgame?
Like,
That's not right.
but I tell you something, the h pawn is scary.
Is bishop to e4. Now you can take the bishop, of course, but the knight will still get back. Both pawns are charging. We're lining up for a searching for Bobby Fischer ending. Both h pawns are running.
I was expecting bishop b1, but she missed it. No time on the clock.
Bishop
Players
b1 would have
just playing
shielded the rook.
instinctively.
Yep. Now the bishop has nowhere to go, and the pawn looks like it's lost on a2, and that should seal it. What an amazing game.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, that ending there had us on the edge of our seats. That is the kind of nerve jangling game, right? You really need like 10 seconds pause just to kind of calm yourself down. But the players don't have that. They have to move on to the next game almost immediately. We've seen this position before. It's your King's Indian attack.
Yeah, go ahead and tell Anthony Levin and Colin McGurty that one's for the news report, that game, because that one had a little bit of everything. Okay, we're back to what we saw in game two. We didn't quite get the full on King's Indian attack position. Now, this knight, just like in game one, is going to hop into e3 one day. If it went to e3 right away, it probably would have gotten captured, actually. This is where you probably prefer the knight over the bishop. Very, very nice move, bishop e3. You want to keep the knight because the knight wants to get to f5 or to d5.
Yeah. And completely agree with you. I think someone told me that. I learned that this lesson the hard way, that knights are actually better than bishops because they have more squares to control and the pawn structure is relatively fixed. So there we see white trying to mobilize, and the tactics keep coming. You can't take on d4 with a pawn, at least, because the queen is loose on c2.
Yep, the pawn is definitely pinned. I did like that decision by black to play bishop takes f1. You don't usually see a bishop give itself away for a knight on the first row like that. But that just goes to show you how weak black's light squares were and did not want the knight hopping in. So eval bar says white's a little better, but I don't know, kind of feels easier for black to play, honestly. These are just very, very obvious targets in the center of the chessboard. Okay, queen takes was found.
Yeah, I it's like one of those positions where there's like pros and cons for both sides, right? I can see that the pawn on d4 is going to be super weak. And if the knight manages to land on d5 and sit there pretty, then everything is going to be very, very nice for black. But on the other hand, this is the problem. Like the rook comes to c1, it has a target on c7, and the knight isn't exactly what we call stable on a d5 because it can be chased away by the bishop. So yeah, swings and roundabouts, as we say.
Yeah, and I guess if white does trade d for c, then we would prefer the bishop over the knight by a little bit. So it's probably where the computer's going with this very, very marginal advantage. Okay, now if you move the rook sideways, Does white play d5, idea d6? I don't know. D5, I guess rook to d8 might stymie that whole idea. Unless it's a tactic. Unless you can play d6 anyway. Actually, almost can play d6 anyway because of some back rank tactics.
Yeah,
Almost.
it feels so tempting, right? But I'm not quite sure it's working. But I was with you there. D5, D6 was my first instinct. And we're seeing Aleksandra go for a different type of setup, just piling on the pressure on C7. And I'm expecting white to perhaps go bishop to C6 and to get rid of that horse in the middle.
Looks like wholesale trades. After bishop takes, rook takes, the c pawn falls, black trades rooks, wins the d pawn, and we have a pretty symmetrical endgame. Maybe white's rook because it gets the first move. Could it target the queenside pawns first? It's probably what Maltsevskaya is analyzing here. So let's go into analysis mode. Let's take a look at this. If the bishop takes the knight, of course, white made a move, but so we'll go back for a second. Oh, no, they're making moves. Okay, we'll just go with this position. So bishop takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes. And white does get the first move, but if it doesn't result in an immediate netting of a pawn, it's probably not anything. And I think black can survive, right? Somehow.
Yeah, I
e5.
think so too. Wait, we've got to go to the live because there's been a big development, Mike, and we just quickly do
We missed
a
it.
little action replay. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
basically what happened, there was a big night fork at the end. So, wow,
Hey, well,
there
let's
we
look
can
at that
see.
because we don't normally hit the rewind button, but we have to here because unexpectedly, while we were doing our analysis, we missed something. So the king went to g2, the rook went to e2, pinning the pawn. Watch out. Of course, we know nobody watched out because the game ended. Knight e3, forking everything. And Lano's been a killer with her knights. Remember, she played that knight to a6 move earlier, and now she finds knight e3 winning everything, winning the game, and extending the lead to 4 games. Thank you for pointing that out, Yovi. Let's go back to
Yeah,
our game in progress now.
that's a devastating trick to fall into. And it's very difficult to actually just recover your composure from that because she'd already clawed back a point. The 3+1 portion had some ups and downs, but that one, it's going to be very, very painful. But Katerina has the white pieces. She's got a very nice safe a space advantage rather, and I'm really liking her position here. So I'm expecting, yes, double up on the E line and just keep asking the question to black. How are you going to connect your rooks? How are you going to develop? How are you going to deal with, oh, king side attack? How you like them apples, Mike?
Nice movie quote. I think it's actually the kind of move I would expect by Maltsevskaya, not by Lano. Lano has been able to keep things restrained and understanding she's got this lead. She doesn't need to take any risks or anything. I just want to touch base on the game that we just saw. It's actually another example of Maltsevskaya not taking what the position gives her. She could have just gone to that drawn end game and said, hey, there's plenty of match time left. I'll just keep the deficit at 3. I just think she's trying to win the unwinnable position. And okay, she's a better player than a knight fork, but that's kind of what I saw in that previous game. So I don't know where this H pawn's going, though. I don't think this H pawn, I think it's just a move. I don't see it really going anywhere.
hmm Well, modern day chess is like you go all the way up the board, not to win in the middle game. This is what I find to be the most funny. You do it to win in an end game. Because you literally keep the king caged on that side of the board, defending the potential h7 weak pawn.
Yeah, Alpha Zero taught us that. The pawn gets to h6, and then 47 moves later, a rook gets behind the h pawn and wins it, or the king gets mated, as you say. Too deep for me. But okay, now we have a very, very weak d6 pawn. That is probably the lion's share of why black is considered worse by the computer. But white decides to trade off that pawn, going for activity rather than trying to just milk the advantage slowly.
hmm Well, there's an awful lot of activity happening on the E line.
It's true.
All we need is the white rook to maneuver over to e4, and then we're sorted. But okay, bishop to g5, big attack on the queen. And
Yeah, we,
now,
I was
Yeah,
just
I
going to
was
say, but
trying to
the
think
black
about.
rook could have gone to e8 too, and we would have had complete traffic on the e file. By the way, we need a name for that when an entire file has pieces on every single square. Let's chat. Think of a name for that when a file has 8 pieces on it. While you think about that, we'll get back to the game, and the best answer we'll read on the air.
Hmm. That's a deal. I like it. And well, we're seeing the bishop go back to the e3 square, and it's an open position. There aren't any pawns in the center, so here it's super important that the pieces find their purpose. So I really love queen to b3. I'm expecting, the queen to actually step up to e7 just to cover b7. And, the big thing is, how is black going to mobilize the a8 rook? But no, I did not like that one because this is the thing. You pin.
Yeah, exactly. When you have no light squared bishop and you're weakening a very important piece in a light square, it's incredibly dangerous. Apparently, there was something better than bishop to e3, but that's the most natural move I've ever seen. A little bit strange there, but now black should just duck out of the pin and play rook to b8 because can I say it again? There's already PP on the PP, and there's more coming. So you gotta get rid of that pin. Basically, it's too big of a
Yeah.
deal in this game.
So apparently, Mike, bishop to g4 was the move instead of bishop to f3, just attacking the rook. But this looks also very, very nice for white. The white rook is now infiltrating the position. I'm also looking at rook c8 ideas. White has the bishop pair.
Yeah, White's got a lot of activity here. Just reading some of the chat's answers. We've got jump the octave file. Okay, we've got 8 pile. But here's my favorite so far. Keep having more answers come in. But Aliyah EJ says the totem file. First of all, I like that because the totem pole is high. But also, we just got back from EWC, which had a totem also where they put all of the different trophies. So for double reasons, Aliyah EJ, we're going with the totem file until somebody gives us a better answer. Okay, now the black king has weakened himself, which means the bishops are about to play.
Yeah, and
Ooh.
look at this. Be careful. Okay, now you can pick up the a6 pawn. That's if you want. Yeah, I would take it.
Yep, I would take it too,
And then,
weakening the b5 pawn as well. Actually, I'm kind of surprised she's not taking it right away, but she may be looking at something else. Now, the rook is loose on a6. Does that matter in any way? I don't think so. She did take.
yeah. Well, I was just checking that the d1 square was covered. And, well, uh-oh. Now it's chaos on the board because the queen has come in. The rook is got its eyes on the d1 square, and also those double h pawns, they can start motoring up the board. So we could see a very quick turnaround here, and I'm expecting that. Oh,
What?
queen
What? Didn't I
b1.
draw an arrow to the checkmate? Yeah, I drew an
You did.
arrow. Lano does not see my arrows. And just like that, an unexpected loss for Maltsevskaya turns into an unexpected win following up, and the margin is back to 3. So each player has gifted each other something, although it should be noted that Maltsevskaya had taken over that position, and she was justly rewarded with a full point. Okay, 6-3, looking at the match clock. This is almost certainly going to be our final 3+1 game, unless we have some other really surprising blunder by one of the players.
Yeah, I agree. This is looking like it's going to be the last game in the 3+1. And then we're going to be having 15 minutes of a bullet chess, 1 minute plus 1 second on the clock. And well, it's all bets are off, right? If Alexandra manages to narrow the gap to 2.
Absolutely. And we've been talking a lot about the fact that Aleksandra played 2 classical games in the Turkish league today. If anybody wants to do a deep dive and go into the Turkish league and tell us how long those games lasted as far as hours and minutes, that'd be a cool stat. You would be our statistician of the day. Because I would be curious, is she on hour 10 of chess? She might be, right? Maybe, a couple of 3 or 4 hour classical games, and now she's already into hour 2 or 3 here. I've never played 10 hours of classical chess, that's for sure. Not in one day.
Yeah, I think the most I've done is well, in the UK it was very popular to do 3 games per day.
That's a lot.
And now it seems crazy, right?
It does. When I was 8 years old, I played a 7.5 hour game because we had repeating time controls. Those were back in the adjournment days, but you couldn't adjourn a last round game. Anyway, it was more about my ineptitude of winning a winning position. So here, though, it's just multiple games. And when you're a chess professional, sometimes you got to play two events in one day. All right, queenside pawn majority for Maltsevskaya, which, Alpha Zero would announce, mate in 97. But the point is that white can make a passed pawn a lot more easily than black because 4 against 3 takes a lot longer to make a passed pawn.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. I judge it by the mobility of the pawn majority. And here you can see white is going to get motoring. You can actually lift up the rook to d3 and start corralling that pawn on a3. And here you can go, oh, wow, b5.
Yeah, I guess the further the pawn gets down the board, you can combine both ideas. Let's advance the pawn and let's corral the a3 pawn a little bit later. Look at those black pieces. They're completely bundled up. And, if you're white, you do run the risk maybe because your pawns are disconnected that you might lose one. But the pressure really is on black to deal with the pawn more than anything. And luckily, she's got 2 minutes to do it. Clocks are exactly equal. Lagno hasn't really gotten into too much time pressure so far in the match today. So that's good news for her bullet skills. Do you recall in any of her previous WSCCs how she was in bullet? Was that one of her fortes, Yovi? Do you remember?
I just
Putting
remember
you on
her
the spot.
being overall such a such a great player. That's what
Yeah.
I it's like the emotions you remember, but the actual games they just fly by. And and here we're seeing, Kateryna, she's doing all the right things. She's expanding on the king's side, just shuffling forward, just maintaining the status quo. I tell you who did impress me with her bullet skills, Alice Lee.
Yes.
She
And
really very quick.
yeah, I mean, I almost always say when I'm commentating and doing journalism, I don't root for anybody. But those of you know, she's been a Chess Kid ambassador for a long time. So it would be pretty cool if Alice continues her amazing couple of years of chess. All right, well, back to this one. Final game of 3+1. If Maltsevskaya wins another one and closes the gap to 2 points, then it gets really interesting. And she's definitely got the better position here. She's got about 20 extra seconds on the clock. Her pawn is relatively blockaded at the moment, but black is using all of her forces to keep an eye on this pawn and to guard the a3 pawn. Now, a dream situation would be if white can win the a3 pawn and not lose the b5 pawn. Yovi, you're a stronger player. Is there any way in the world white can accomplish both those things?
Yeah, I'm looking at that, and I'm looking as to whether you can reroute the knight. But in the end, I'm thinking perhaps it's going to be very difficult. And there you see that, in fact, she just goes for the trade, and I'm expecting her. Okay, this is very tricky, right? And the big plan is just simply to target the f7 pawn. You don't think about pushing the a pawn. You leave that in the back of your pocket and start targeting those weaknesses. Now, knight to d8. Knight
I'm
to e7, very calm.
shocked that the computer says this is equal. This looks very difficult to defend for black. Um, the f7 pawn is still weak. The knight was pinned for the moment. The a5 pawn is not blockaded in any way. There's no pressure against the white king. How is this equal? It's not possible.
It's not equal. I mean, the computer is just very clever and seeing beyond the horizon. For human, this is basically white is playing a pawn up because black's pawn majority on the king side, they're not motoring, they're not generating any counterplay whatsoever. So it's all about that a pawn, as you can expect.
Yeah, I mean, this knight is not even able to rush to the a pawn. It can, of course, go to d5, but that's not keeping an eye on the a pawn in any way. And that also allows the rook to come right back and reignite the attack on f7. So I'm pretty sure even if Mark Dvoretsky was around today and I just showed him this position, his guess would not be zero point 0.0.
No, it would be like a game of two results, right? White either wins or draws. And talking about that, I'm seeing that the e-pawn is making a bid for freedom. And this is one of the things that you do have to be a little bit careful of. But White's rook is so active. I mean, sometimes you see situations in this type of endings, especially rook and pawn endings, where White has that advanced a pawn, and they advance it all the way out to a7. But this just gives a free hand for the kingside pawn majority to start motoring up the board. And wow, and whilst I was talking, the f7 pawn has fallen.
And the eval bar
what is
hasn't
happening?
budged. You've won a clean pawn, and the eval bar is still not impressed. I'm really flabbergasted by all of this. So, but Black is going for the counterattack rather than just playing passively, and apparently that's the right strategy. Now Maltsevskaya is down to 15 seconds. Some amazing ideas here by Lagno. And notice if the pawns trade and the knight ends up on e3, you have a trouble crossing over because rook f1 would skewer the king and the rook. So that's why this counterattack is proving to be so annoying. Really impressed by Lagno noticing this. Now suddenly, how did her pawn get faster than the white pawn? That's not even fair.
It's not even fair, but I tell you something, the e-pawn is not long for the world, and sure enough, it disappears. And this is a big problem, actually. White is suddenly much, much better because the black king is caught offside.
Yep, g6 is actually a little bit weak, and White had to bail out there and get rid of the a-pawn to take care of the e-pawn, still making sure to play for 2 results. Great game so far by Maltsevskaya. She's been in control. I don't know if she'll be able to convert it to a full point. Yeah, the king is probably going to move and counterattack. No, in fact, she decides to guard the knight. Now, was knight?
Yeah.
Okay, there was a trick, and she fell into the trick, and she's still going to draw, but this was the problem. The rooks were lined up,
Yeah.
and she didn't see it.
Yeah, and this is actually something that we've seen Kateryna do time and time again. She's such a tricky customer, always finding these resources. Okay, now the H pawn is going to drop off, and this is going to be just a draw. Yeah, here we're going to see the king and knight. They're going to stick together like glue. And the knight is, as long as it has a circuit, it's okay. They just need to be together.
Okay, I'm just looking at move 62. I'm already looking ahead. Move 112 is the key number here because we know we're going to see 50 moves. So here we go. Get ready for your 50 moves. We're about 14 moves in, but Maltsevskaya has got to play until move 112. Now, should Lagno's flag fall, I believe our server calls it a draw. I know in FIDE rules it's a win because you can technically set up a checkmate with king and knight versus king and rook. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but according to our server logic from like 10 years ago, unless there was oh no, she hung rook h4. Oh no. Forget everything I said about our server logic. Now we're back to chess logic. King and rook versus king. What a tragedy. And we talked about fatigue. I don't know if that played a part. I think she was just playing on, on reflex there, and she hung her knight, unfortunately.
Yeah, but in the end, there you can see the reaction from the players. In the end, the scoreline is 7-3 and just 15 minutes of bullet chess remaining. 4-point deficit, Mike. I gotta ask you, is this even possible to catch up?
I hope you have Gudina on your speed dial so you can ask her during the break how she did it. It's not unprecedented. It's unlikely, but she's, been able to play relatively fast. She's got to play fast and clean and perfect. We will see coming up.
Absolutely. Kateryna in powerful shape as she takes a 4-point lead. Well, everything is going to hinge on the bullet portion, but I'll tell you one thing. Don't forget to subscribe to our Twitch channel. Unlock exclusive emotes of your favorite players, no ads on Chess.com, and fun content during the broadcast breaks. So use !subscribe in chat to level up your streaming experience. And we're going to be right back with the bullet action just after this break.
Join the community club on Chess.com and participate in amazing community events every week. On Mondays, challenge yourself with incredible openings in Opening Roulette. Don't miss on Title Tuesday every week right after Title Tuesday. On Wednesday, join Arena Kings and compete against a lineup of legendary creators. On Fridays, try the all-new Community Freestyle Fridays and throw opening theory out the window. And finally, round up the week by showing off your speed in the Community Bullet Brawl. Win prizes, battle legends, and challenge yourself. Play in the community tournaments every week on Chess.com.
Hey, I'm Grandmaster Pepe Cuenca, and if I had to name this game, I would call it the Festival of the Intermediate Move. You absolutely can't miss this tactical gem played by 15 years old American rising star Alice Lee, who had the black pieces against former world champion Marija Musichuk from Ukraine in the Kens Cup. The game starts with the Ro16 variation, a calm and positional line, and we get a Maroczy structure, always nice and smooth for white. Musichuk plays her bishop on the long diagonal and plays a4, preventing the typical b5 counterplay for black. But then Alice plays queen to g5, and Musichuk had a golden chance to strike with e5. That would have been decisive. The point is that after knight f3, the black queen is in real trouble, and even the bishop from b2 can come back into the action via c1. Tactical fireworks. But in the actual game, Musichuk plays bishop c1 instead, a bit slow. And now white plays b4, a bold space grabbing move. And from here on, buckle up, because Alice Lee delivers a sequence of 5-6 insane moves in a row. First, knight to d7. The idea, if white pushes b5, black has the intermezzo knight to c5, attacking the queen. And after that, the bishop just calmly returns to d7. But now white has weakened the dark squares, sneaky stuff. White plays f4, trying to stop all these jumps. But here comes the hammer, a5, kaboom! Now the c5 square is guaranteed for the knight. Then white plays queen to e3. And what does Alice do? Another crazy intermezzo, e5, boom again. There is a fork on d4. And after knight d to e2, Alice shows zero mercy. Bishop takes e4. And wait for it, after knight takes e4, we get another intermediate move. Boom! Bang, 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 black gets the piece back with decisive advantage. In the game, white played knight to g3, thinking the game's over in her favor. But look at this absolute beauty. Wait, what? Is black just giving away the queen? Nope, here comes rook to e1 check, and the queen is miraculously saved in apotheotic fashion. If the king goes to f2, then there's a nasty fork on d3. And if the king goes to h2, like in the game, black calmly plays bishop to e5, sealing the deal. After all that tactical artillery, we reach an endgame where black is up and exchange on a pawn, and the queenside pawns are just sitting there like fruit waiting to be picked up by the bishop. Alice collects the nectar, pushes the pawns, and after rook to c1, Musichuk resigns, because after rook takes a1, the rook from a8 stops the h-pawn cleanly. What a game!
And we are back with the final segment, the bullet portion of the match between Kateryna Lagno and Aleksandra Maltsevskaya. Now, Kateryna Lagno is nurturing a 4-point advantage over Aleksandra. So the big question, what do both players have to do for Kateryna? The answer is very simple. She just has to maintain that lead. But what will it take for Aleksandra to actually close down that gap and perhaps take it to tie breaks?
Well, she's going to have to nail the math because there may only be 4 games in the 1+1 and she's down 4. So she has to start strong, do strong in the middle, and she has to continue winning some games at the end there. She might need to go 4-0 here. Even a single win by Lagno might be a little bit too much. And if we can look at the player cams there, we can see there's a bridge behind Lagno's right shoulder, and that bridge is halfway built. She has almost completed the bridge to the quarterfinals, if I can extend my metaphor. Of course, as she leans forward and blocks the bridge. But she's got one hand on the quarterfinals. Remember, she's made it to the semifinals 4 consecutive years. And she's got 1 foot so far in the quarterfinals, as Maltsevskaya has to somehow gain some energy. Long day of chess for her.
Yes, but Kateryna Lagno just has been proving that she is a powerhouse at blitz chess, playing so fast, spotting all the tactical tricks. You called it, Mike. You know, she's been fantastic with those knight tactics. Watch out for those crafty pieces. And they
Here we go.
are off.
With a
Um,
Sicilian, we've seen a lot of Sicilians with Lano as white, a lot of theoretical Sicilians, and they're going back to this time and off variation that we've seen so many times. A little bit different though, a little bit different structure. IQP for black. And I want to say that her aggression and her uncompromisingness, Maltsevskaya, has not really been rewarded yet. She's actually cost herself a couple of half points, but in the bullet, it might be rewarded. It's much more difficult to defend than to attack in the bullet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you one thing though, if Maltsevskaya like swaps off knights, because knights have been her downfall, right? She's blundered the knights, she's fallen foul of some tricks with the pieces. So just get them off the board, clarify the position, and then just play on the time. And there we're seeing actually there's a possibility with a bishop coming to h4. Maybe the black knight can start those jumps.
Yeah, we can definitely see that. Now, the queen is not traditionally the best blockader in chess. Now we see the rook about to come down to c4. That would have skewered the rook. The rook would have skewered the queen and the bishop. So immediately spotted by Lana, she is a great tactician. So she steps the queen back, and now she's just making some trades. And you know what? A really boring 4-minute game would be just what Lana wants. You know, keep the match at a 4-point margin, and that's kind of what it looks like we're going for. Now, there's still enough heavies on the board. We can't just write this one off. And in fact, I like the white bishop's activity even more than the black's bishops because it's aiming at the king. So I like white's position, and it makes a lot of sense for the match to just keep playing this one out.
Yeah, and there she is looking out the queen from the action. I'm also expecting the queen to zoom up and start targeting the f pawn. And yeah, I agree with you, Mike. A boring 4-minute, 1-minute game is exactly what the doctor has prescribed. Okay, well, for Maltsevskaya, the big question is what should she do? How can she mix this up a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, throw the rook on the second rank, but this bishop, as long as it aims at a bunch of hot air, it's not, you're not going to get in the game. You're not going to create complications. And now the pawns are starting to drop. Uh-oh, rook to f5. The rook's going to have to move. It's probably losing now due to the looseness of the king. Uh-oh, there's a fork town population Lagno, and it looks like she's going to extend the lead. A quick resignation, smart by Maltsevskaya to just immediately resign. But now it's 5 points. Now you have to win incredibly quickly. And
Hmm.
it won't be Lano's strategy to lose 4 slow games, but she could lose 4 long games and still win this match. She's going to try to play good chess and slow chess.
Yeah, it's a 5-point difference. And I agree with you because not only do you have to win quickly, in order to end the game on the spot, you need to basically checkmate. And checkmating is very, very difficult. I think I read a little fun fact that the last time that there had been a checkmate in a world championship match was like in 1929.
1929, really.
Yeah, yeah. It just goes to show it's
um,
super
that
difficult to checkmate.
that is a pity because in the final Carlsen Karyakin game in 2016, now technically it was a tiebreak game. It was Queen H6, which was a forced
Yeah.
mate in two, and I guess Karyakin didn't allow the mate to happen on the board. He resigned, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
but it just, but also it was in the tie break. So, but anyway, it
doesn't
was
count.
just I don't know where I saw this fact. I might not be a trustworthy source of this, but I thought I saw it somewhere. Anyway, we're going to see a lot of population, a totem, almost a totem file on the D line.
I love the callback. But Maltsevskaya uncharacteristically bled about 40 seconds from her clock, and now she's facing a 30-second time deficit without any sort of noticeable advantage on the board. We have no totem and no advantage for white. Not good news here for the vice Polish champion of 2024.
Yeah, not good news. She needs to play super fast to even think about clawing back some points. I mean, I don't think we're even talking now about Masovskaya managing to take this to tie breaks. I mean, we're just really talking that Alexandra is trying to win as many points as possible. And there you see the queen is coming in now, the rook is coming down, and it's so many weaknesses around the White King. What is E? I almost feel like E3 is coming. E3 followed by Queen to G3. Yep. And there you see, Queen takes Bishop, and there Kateryna Lagno wins another point. And so, well, she finds herself 6 points down, and things are just going perfectly for Kateryna Lagno. Everything is working her way. And now we're going to see challenge in the center, but we've seen this type of strategy before from Aleksandra. And the problem is that the play is just simply so straightforward for Kateryna Lagno. She just has to put pressure on the d5 pawn, and there we're seeing Aleksandra just develop the pieces. But here it's all about white putting pressure against their d5, whereas black desperately has to drum up the counterplay and get control over the dark squares.
Yeah, I'm back. I got a little excited there about pressing the wrong button, so I'm going to take the L on that one. But thank you, Yogi, for covering things. And it looks like every game is going to be about $125 difference, kind of like our first match of the day. Things are probably a little bit out of reach with 8 minutes left, but you never know. Maybe there'll be a disconnection by Lano, just like I had. I'm not rooting for it, but I'm just saying you can keep playing in the internet era. Maybe you'll have a giant thunderstorm, but we're not rooting for that, of course. We're just rooting for some more good chess and extra
Yeah.
pawn for Lano.
Yeah, an extra pawn for Lagno, and also there we're seeing that she has a commanding position as well. She has a beautiful bishop there on e5. Just needs to move, but it has a target on g7. The white king is very safe. Once you just to give it some air with some either g3 or h3 pawn move, it doesn't really matter. Rook to d7 is also in the equation. The pawn is hanging on b7. White is more or less spoiled for choice, and there you see it's less than 8 minutes on the match clock, and it's a 6 point deficit, Mike. You cannot catch that up.
Yeah, you know what's unfortunate for black there is I'm just gonna, well, I'm not even gonna go back one move. Black could have traded queens and put the rook on e2 and probably gotten the pawn back, but then it would have been rook bishop in 5 versus rook bishop in 5, which means the next 3 minutes would have gone by in a totally drawn position. So you actually have to accept the worst position here, which Maltsevskaya did. I think it's the right idea to try to go for a win. Otherwise, it's just more time being bled from the clock. I'm not saying that there's anything here, but you have to try for something. So smart idea,
Right.
but I don't know if it's enough smart to win the match.
There was a nice threat of a queen takes f2 being in the air and some back rank ideas, but okay, that's is over. And there you're seeing rook takes c2. So now black has the advantage, but lots of play left, lots of defensive resources for Kateryna. She can keep the game going for a long time.
Yeah, white was trying to trap the rook with king d3. The rook could, of course, take on f2 at the right moment. Uh-oh, but she falls into a fork. Probably the only time today that, no, sorry. Yeah, the only time today that Lana was fallen into one of these little one movers. So Maltsevskaya probably going to get the W here, but it's going to take more time. And Lana, of course, is going to bleed all the time she can off the match clock.
Yes. And yeah, Kateryna can take her time as long as she wants to play this one out. What's important is that the match clock just ticks down. I reckon this one will take maybe 40 seconds to complete.
Sounds about right, which puts us down about 5 minutes remaining, and then the margin's going to be also five. So if we play hyper bullet, no increment, then we get 5 games in. We can suddenly switch the rules, maybe. But well within your rights, of course, to play this out. In fact, we'd be calling her out for not playing it out if she resigned here. So okay, she actually lost on time in that position. That's why we didn't see any more chess. Okay, so the margin is five, but unfortunately the clock is five.
Yep. And we see Maltseva go for this plan that she's been relying on throughout this match. It's a nice system, you know. She's been getting reasonable positions with it. It's very simple. She can reroute the knight to f1, go to bishop e3, and then try to get control over the d5 and f5 strongholds. So exactly what's happening. And I like the way that she's sped up. So things, I would say, small promise, small advantage for her.
Yeah, she pre-moved a lot to start this game, and whoops, somehow the queen does not belong on that square. Knight to d4. We didn't even have to find it. That's the beauty of the blue arrow. And when the knight goes to d4, the queen, if she takes, is gonna get trapped, or what's the deal? I think maybe the queen would be a little bit loose.
It felt like it was going to get trapped because there was some issues with b5 happening, but okay, we're seeing b6. It's still very tempting, right, to go knight to d4.
Yeah, it definitely is. And normally, when a player is not doing well on the scoreboard, we might say something about the fact that the opening keeps on being repeated. But actually, I like what you said earlier, Yovi. It's not really the opening that's the problem. White's been getting some pretty reasonable positions in this KIA. And we have an exchange sack alert. Once again, the blue arrow helps us after rook takes. If rook takes, the knight hangs 2 minors for the rook. And if rook takes and the queen takes, then we have
Well,
knight
if you go
h1.
rook takes bishop, queen takes, you
Yeah.
can take again, queen takes knight. There was a nice knight fork on e7.
So good that I'm just going to have everybody imagine the white queen taking this knight, the queen taking back, and the knight fork on e7. That's essentially what was going to happen in that position. I missed it. Yovi found it. And actually, it's been Lagno that's been deadly with the knights. Maltsevskaya missed her chance to be deadly, but that was a lot to conjure. We had the blue arrow to tell us there was something there, but you have to see a lot in a short amount of time. 6 seconds left for the 23-year-old against Lagno, the 2022 champion.
Yes, and there we see Lagno. She's in her element in this type of position. You know, she's beating back the white knights. I had a position very, very similar to this a long time ago when I played Lagno for the first time in a classical game. So she's got a lot of experience in handling this particular pawn formation. And okay, she can even give up the f5 square. It doesn't really matter. 8 seconds. She just has to mind her king, make sure it doesn't get checkmated. And this bishop on g2, it's not the best of pieces.
Yeah, even if the knight moves in a bunch of thin air, but these next 7 seconds will matter for about 125 bucks. That's a pretty good return on investment for your time. The margin of victory does affect the cash payouts. So nervy moments here. Uh-oh, the knight hops in, and now the black king
Uh,
could be toast.
it looks like it's toast now. The queen is going to swoop in and what?
She flagged. She flagged, trying to consider whether or not to play queen h5 or queen h7. She couldn't figure out which one to play, and she ran out of time. And I told you they were nervy moments. It might just seem like a number on the scoreboard, but that was about $125 for Lagno at the end of the day. Unfortunate for Maltsevskaya.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Just as she was going to make a winning move, the clock runs out. It just goes to show the clock is a very important piece in this particular time control. And there we're seeing same strategy again from the players. It's all about that isolated queen's pawn. Uh, It's an active position. At least
Yeah,
it has that in its merit, but not that much time on the match clock, under a minute and a half.
probably our last game. Time stops for no woman, and now it's just all about finishing strong. She definitely showed that she belongs. She did qualify through the Title Tuesday Grand Prix, which takes many months to qualify for. So a worthy invite, but it looks like it's going to come up short here. and Lagno will advance to the quarterfinals after this game. But let's see what unfolds here in this final game of the day.
Yeah, and I must say, hats off though to Kateryna. I've been very impressed by the way that she's handled her nerves, the way that she's played very actively, how she's found all of these incredible tactical tricks, and with no time on the clock as well. And there we see her again. She's playing all the right moves to put pressure on Aleksandra. Now she's just refocusing the queen. I imagine that rook to oops, whoops, whoops, whoops. Okay, there is rook to d3 at the end of this, but okay, that was missed. And now it's just a simple case of just consolidating the position. This is probably going to be the last game that we see.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to draw a parallel between the two winners today. I actually think that Lagno is just better when the clock gets low at finding tactics, even better than Wenjun. I know that's saying something. I know our defending champion is very worthy, but should we see a head-to-head encounter between them both in the finals, let's keep this in the back of our mind, how tricky Lagno can be at any moment in the game. They're in different sides of the bracket. I believe Wenjun is the one that knocked out Lagno last year, and a fork again, right on cue, except it's actually Maltsevskaya that finds it. So she missed mate in one. She missed queen d1. We could have been out of here. She's making us work overtime. Wait, she missed it again.
Yes, and there we see that Aleksandra wins after that blunder from Kateryna Lagno. But on the whole, a very satisfactory outing there for the former Women's World Blitz champion. I mean, she did show in the 5+1, the 3+1 that she was firmly in control. The bullet portion, okay, that's just random. It's anyone's game. But Michael, what are your impressions of this whole match so far?
I thought I heard you say Michael. We're gonna get past that though. I have learned that knights are incredibly tricky in blitz chess, and that I don't want to face Lagno with knights on the board. I counted 3 or 4. Of course, Maltsevskaya had that final knight move in that position, but I am just really impressed at how clinical she can play with the clock ticking down. I can't wait to see how far she's able to advance. We had almost the same score in this match as our first match of the day, so it was a fun one. This was a good way to close the day for me.
Yes, certainly was a fun one. And we're going to go on a short break because when we return, we're going to have an interview with the woman of the hour, Kateryna Lagno herself. So stay tuned.
It's only a pawn. Give me the bishop. Yes. Tactics. No, it's on F1. Oh yes. Oh yes. Check. No. That's on G2. Yeah. I'm scrambled. Someone find the queen so I can promote it. mate. It's only 8 balls. Somewhere it's made. Okay.
The fastest, easiest way to improve your chess is now the most fun way to improve your chess. Chess.com's brand new puzzles now have loads of exciting features to make solving a joy. Earn points and race your friends across puzzle tiers from wood to bronze, all the way to legend. Rack up bonuses for streaks, for speed, for accuracy, for daily solving, difficulty, and more. And now, you can get feedback from Coach while solving puzzles. Coach lets you know what each puzzle's goal is and why a move doesn't actually work. And, as always, puzzles will be selected just for your level from our database of hundreds of thousands of high-quality, beautiful, brilliant, and instructive puzzles. So what are you waiting for? Try puzzles today on web, Android, or iOS, and have a blast leveling up your chess.
And we are back, and joining us here it is none other than Kateryna Lagno, who just won her match against Aleksandra Maltsevskaya. So first up, congratulations. Second question, how are you feeling?
Thank you. Well, I'm tired, but it's normal. It was a tough match, so I will have rest now.
Yeah, speaking of tiredness, apparently Maltsevskaya played 2 games in the Turkish league before she played you today. And I'm wondering, did you actually watch her games in the Turkish league? Because I think she might have repeated some of the same openings against you.
No, actually, I didn't. But come on, I'm older. That's so. So I think it's almost, like equal.
And I was going to ask the question. So you've been in this situation before. You played many women's speed chess championships. You love blitz. You've been women's world blitz champion. Does practice make perfect? Does it get any easier the more you play?
Well, yes, I tried to practice a few days ago just to feel the game because I didn't play for quite a while. I mean, online. And yes, yesterday I played, I don't know how many games, maybe 30, just to get in shape. And I am happy it worked out. Yeah.
Now, Kateryna, you mentioned age, and I'm going to just look ahead to the next match. I'm going to be very careful with my question, of course, but you're either going to play Aleksandra Kostyaniuk or Carissa Yip. Obviously, one of these players is from your generation. One is another person in their young 20s. Do you generally like playing people that are your generation, or do you prefer maybe playing these younger players?
Well, actually, I don't mind. I played with, of course, I played many games with Aleksandra, and as well with Carissa. So it will be a very interesting match. I do think that Aleksandra is a favorite, So, but of course, Carissa is a very, very talented and young player. So I think it will be very interesting and tough match, and I'm gonna follow it because it will be interesting to watch.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
do you
would
usually
certainly
watch
be.
the matches live or do you watch them afterwards? Sorry, Yovi. Will you watch it as it takes place to see their expressions or will you just look at the games afterward?
No, when I have time, I watch it in direct. Like, well, if I have time, but well, it depends.
Oh, it's great to follow the online matches, especially your games have been very exciting. Now we also have a question from one of our viewers who asks. This is from Asmoda. Says, which time format is your favorite out of the three?
You mean over the board or online?
I think we can go for the whole. Online and then over the board. Which one is your favorite?
Well, I think over the board it's like 3+2. Oh, 3+1. What do we play? 3+2, yeah? Or 3+1?
Yeah.
Usually. So, well, it's not a really big deal, yes, 3+1 or 3+2. Just I'm a bit, when I work with the mouse, like it's, I can make mouse slips and everything. I'm not very used to this, so I have to practice more. But Blitz is my favorite time control. So 3+1, 3+2, and even without the increment, I can also have some fun playing without increments.
Oh,
Yeah, my final
and
question was basically just that. EWC was played with no increment. You just mentioned no increment. Do you think if we ever had an event with no increment, that would actually increase your chances of winning? Because you were pretty fast today, especially in the closing moments of each match.
Well, I don't think so. I like to have some seconds. I mean, it's there is a difference when you play for fun and when you play a match and you need to play good and you have more pressure. So well, and she was fast. She was a bit slow in the first segment of the day, but then she speed up, and I didn't feel that I was like pushing her on the clock. So it was she was really fast. Just she blundered in some important games, and that's why I kept advantage. But it was not clear. Yeah.
yeah. And well, it was certainly an exciting game. And like you said, you definitely took advantage of the slowness on the first portion. But I was going to ask you, you've played a lot of online tournaments. Do you have a routine going into these events?
Just to practice, yeah, to play a title Tuesday, to play some games with random players. Just okay. For me, it's the most important thing is to play as much as I can. But I don't have so much time, unfortunately. But if I have, yes, I before the tournament, I do play a lot of online games.
Yeah. Well, it's good advice nonetheless, because there's nothing that beats playing a lot of chess. So, Kateryna, I'd like to thank you for your time and congratulations once more for making it to the quarterfinals.
And thank you. Good evening.
And with that, we have another two sets of quarterfinalists, Kateryna Lagno and Wenjun. And looking ahead to Saturday, where we have some very exciting matchups. Mike's already referenced one. Aleksandra Kosteniuk, former Women's World Champion, takes on the mighty Carissa Yip, whose name is very much in the ascendant. And then we have Polina Shuvalova against Mary Arabitsa. Mike, any final predictions of what you expect those matches to be?
Well, Carissa's a former chess kid, so I'm just going to say that. And I'm going to have my iPad on the golf cart with me Saturday morning so I can watch that match. So there's going to be some moments where I'm going to have a split allegiances between me trying to improve my short game and me watching those two play some fast chess. That's the one I'm looking forward to the most. I'm just going to go ahead and say it just because me and Chris go back a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be some riveting action there on Saturday. And that wraps up another thrilling day at the Women's Speed Chess Championship, where, of course, sheer speed, sheer willpower, and of course skill did decide. We have 2 quarterfinalists, and now I gotta like to thank everyone at home for joining in and just being part of the energy and the fun. And a big thank you to you, Mike, for just making the action just go by so quickly. So for now, we're gonna say goodbye, and we'll see you on Saturday. Goodbye.